Good afternoon. I'm Chief John Thompson with the Greensboro Police Department. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. I would like to introduce the folks here in support. Standing behind me, we have Assistant Chief Stephanie Martis on the end. Next to her is Assistant Chief MJ Harris. Behind me we have, and on my left, we have Assistant Chief Chris Schulteis, and we have City Manager Trey Davis on the end down there. The format will be, I have a written statement that will be read. Some of this information was already disclosed in a previous media briefing that we sent out. After I get through reading that statement, we will then open up the floor to questions. So please just be patient. On November 3rd, around 11 p.m., officers were proactively patrolling in the area of 2000 Beasley Street, Studio 6. This location has been an overwhelming concern in the community and among nearby businesses, stemming from incidents of violence, narcotics violations, and prostitution. Officers walking on a post saw a man, later identified as Nathaniel Williams, sitting in the driver's seat of a car in the parking lot. After officers saw marijuana in his lap, he was ordered to exit his car, and he refused several lawful commands to do so. After multiple requests, officers removed Mr. Williams and placed him in handcuffs. During the interaction, Mr. Williams freed one of his hands from the handcuffs and assaulted one of the officers. A struggle occurred that ended on the ground with Mr. Williams refusing to submit, being recuffed by tucking his arm underneath his body. An officer delivered suprascapular strikes to his back shoulder area to get him to release his arm. The arrest was made without further incident. To further our culture of transparency in the police department and to address community concerns and misinformation, I will be filing a petition with the court for the release of the body-worn camera recordings and video-mounted camera recordings capturing the arrest of Mr. Nathaniel Williams. If the petition for release is granted by the court, the Greensboro Police Department will release recordings from this incident to the community consistent with any conditions set by the court. In accordance with state law, we invite Mr. Williams and his attorney to come to the police department to view the BWC and VMC recordings. While this is an ongoing investigation, we do want to address a few items. After initial review of the BWC, we want to clarify two of the following points. First, the officer was not striking Mr. Williams in the head. He was delivering suprascapular strikes, an effective method taught in state training which targets the nerve cluster near the trapezius muscle. So for those two words, just to demonstrate, that is muscle that connects here, the neck and the shoulder. So the target area of those strikes are the shoulder area, and is shown on BWC. That's where the officer was striking. BWC footage showed the placement of the officer's knee was not on Mr. Williams' neck, but on his shoulder, which is an approved subject control technique that we are taught during arrest procedures. After he was detained, Mr. Williams complained of chest pains. Officers requested EMS to respond. Officers further determined that Mr. Williams ingested what they believed to be an illegal narcotic. At that point, the officers made the decision that, per our practice, that he would have to be medically cleared and checked out, and he was transported to the hospital in relation to the ingestion. So this remains an ongoing internal administrative investigation. There, I'm sure, are a lot of questions that are going to be asked about specific details. At this time, because it is a pending investigation, we do not plan to talk about some of those details. So please ask the questions. I will let you know if we are going to talk about those. But we do hopefully anticipate the process allowing us to release the recordings, which will confirm what we have shared at this point with the community, and probably address some of the questions that you may be asking in here today. So we'll turn it over to the group for questions.
What is the protocol for when officers use superscapular strikes?
So it is a technique or method that is used to effect arrest of an individual. It can be used to defend themselves if necessary with a combative assailant. In this particular case, from what I have seen, it was used to, the terminology is to kind of stun that nerve. And what you do is when you stun that nerve, it kind of incapacitates that arm temporarily, allowing officers to gain control of that arm. And so that's a method that is approved and is taught not only in our basic law enforcement training, so in the police academy, approved through the state training, it is something that we do train on in our agency.
Were responding officers potentially aware that Mr. Williams had a previous charge of assaulting a government official when they interacted with him? And if so, could that have led to a more defensive protocol?
I do not have the answer to that. Those questions should be asked when we complete the investigation. But at this point, I don't know exactly what the officers knew in their mind going into that interaction.
I was told that the officers involved in this have not been put on any kind of suspension. They're still on active duty. What was the decision to keep them while this remains an ongoing investigation?
Yeah, so we have some certain inflection points, things that will trigger us to put an officer on admin duty. One is if there's a criminal investigation involved, and the other two being if a serious injury or death occurs in an interaction that we have with the public. So those three things will automatically put us, or we decide to automatically put an officer on admin duty at that point. With this case, obviously none of those things are occurring at this point. Nothing, no serious injury, no death, no criminal investigation at this point. At that, not hitting those points, now it becomes kind of a decision or a discretion. If we find an officer is way outside of policy, egregious in their violation of a policy, or is egregious in maybe a training method that they are not adequate in, we can make a decision to put that officer on admin duty during that investigation. Our initial review of the BWC, neither of those thresholds were met.
How many officers were on scene during this, and how many physically interacted with Mr. Williams?
I will have to follow up to find that out. I don't know. I know that additional officers arrived on scene as the incident escalated through that time. I think from start till Mr. Williams was in custody was 25 to 30 minutes. So once the individual is non-compliant, typically additional officers are called to the scene to assist as needed. I just don't have the timing of how many officers were there initially and then how many responded after the fact, ultimately with how many interacted.
The officer involved, specifically the one seen striking Mr. Williams, has he received any complaints in other cases? And do you know if he was involved in the over 20 pending charges that Mr. Williams is facing right now?
20 pending prior to this night?
Mm-hmm.
That I do not know. That would be something we would be able to determine in the investigation. As it relates to previous incidents, everyone hopefully is aware and understands the restrictions that we have in terms of producing personnel privacy information, so information from their file. State law outlines what we're required to provide, and we can provide that for that officer, but I don't have the answer to that question right now.
So just reiterate again, so Mr. Williams was sitting in the car, correct, when officers approached him?
Yes.
Okay, did the car belong to Mr. Williams?
I do not know.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I think with his interaction on the video, it may belong to somebody else, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay, and what exactly, you said he was sitting in the car, right? So what exactly raised alarm bells that made officers approach him?
So that hotel, the Studio 6, is really a significant area of concern and has been for several months due to crime issues in that area. As we reported out a few weeks ago, Howard Johnson was another location that was also experiencing those same type of things. There were acts of violence, acts of narcotics violations, prostitution. So the officers were over doing exactly what we've asked them to do. The community was asking for help because of the crime coming from that location. They were directed to be over there. These officers were out on foot walking through the parking lot and saw an individual sitting in the car and then made that approach.
When you execute a suprascapular strike, do you do it with a closed hand, or are you supposed to do it with an elbow, or how does that? Can you explain to us how to properly perform that?
Sure. There are guidance that is provided by the state, but oftentimes there are no hard rules as to how a strike could be performed. There's recommendations for effectiveness. And if there is guidance for hard rules, it's typically what we are not supposed to do. So we do not strike areas that would be constituted for deadly force unless deadly force was necessary. So a strike to the throat, for instance, would be considered a deadly force because it potentially could be considered a deadly force because of the nature of that strike. So in the state plan, the BLET, Basic Law Enforcement Training Plan, it actually refers to a method of a hammer fist strike, which is similar to what you saw in the video. You're coming down with the fist, making that striking motion onto the individual. If they were having to wrestle around and fight, and the officer has to do that, and he comes up with his elbow to make that strike, that might not necessarily be taught, but it wouldn't also be something that would be forbidden through policy.
When you find out that a video like this, just 20 seconds, has gone viral and it ends up on places like TMZ, what is step one for you in trying to enact that transparency and figure out how to address it from the police department perspective?
Yeah, that's challenging. We saw a 30-second clip, and unfortunately there is a lot of information, a lot of context that comes with trying to explain that clip. Because yesterday I was sitting in Winston-Salem. I was actually helping out in their assistant chief promotional process. And I'm sitting there on the panel, and my phone dings, and I see a copy of a video. And I saw the first video, and I read the line on it, and handcuffed man beaten by Greensboro Police Department. And my first response back to the assistant chiefs here working, okay, well, what's going on? Was he handcuffed? Let's start figuring out what we need to do to look into this incident. And so, I look at it 24, 26, 28 hours later. That's an eternity when we're talking about media, especially social media. But we can't be irresponsible in our response to the community when we talk about this information. We have to do our due diligence. That means we have to watch the BWC. We have to see the reports that were made. We have to see, that the investigation has started. What point are they at that investigation? And then we have to come up with a plan. What is appropriate information to release to the public? And so it's a process. We've been talking about it all day yesterday. Really had not decided until this morning that we felt we needed to get out and be talking about this with the community. Obviously why we invited you here, but it's important. It's tough because we're trying to balance our ability to be transparent, but doing it correctly with the right information, because I know if I misspeak and say the wrong thing in here, that creates added chaos and misinformation to the public.
Got time for one more question?
Chief, you know, obviously you see the video, and from the outside perspective, you know, people see it and it's blurry and it looks bad.
Mhm.
That's why we're seeing these comments and messages on Facebook. But, you know, you say these strikes are a technique to gain compliance. Did you feel that this was necessary with the suspect on the ground surrounded by 3 other officers?
So that's what we have to determine, and that's what the investigation will determine. I don't think it's appropriate for me to say, was it necessary at this time, not having that full investigation and understanding. And there are 2 kind of marks we look at when we look at a use of force, and it's guided in statute, it's guided in policy. Is it reasonable, and is it necessary? And there is some subjectivity to that. And so, you know, I had a conversation with a community member yesterday about this, and kind of that came up of, you know, was 6 or 7 too many? I said, I don't know. I'm not in the officer's head. I didn't see what they saw. I didn't know what they were thinking. But there is a point where it becomes, or could become, unreasonable. If an officer sits there and you're at, you know, 20, 25, 30, I think that becomes a little easier to say that could be unreasonable. That wasn't necessary. You know, was 6 strikes, 7 strikes necessary? Was it reasonable? Our process, our investigative process, will provide us all of the information that we can gather, that we need to know, to hopefully be able to make that decision. I will just, I know my PIO's not going to be happy with me, but we will take a few more questions. I think this is important. We need to make sure we're having this conversation.
So when you say, the press release said that Mr. Williams assaulted the officer when he freed one of his hands from the handcuffs, can you specify what you would classify as assault the officer?
Are you wanting a detail on what the assault actually was?
Yeah.
That's still being worked out through the investigation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there marijuana found on Mr. Williams' lap? Is that?
That is what the officer was requesting him to exit the vehicle because he believed he saw marijuana on his lap. Was that in fact collected at the scene and submitted to evidence? I don't know at this point if that was, but the belief that he had marijuana on him, which started the narcotics investigation, the request for him to get out of the vehicle, and the refusal of the officer's request to exit the vehicle.
So you don't know, I mean, it's not clear, or if it's not confirmed yet, if he had marijuana on him or not?
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't have the answer to that question.
I have 2 questions about the charges that he faces. For the destruction of evidence charge, is that in regard to what you said about him ingesting something?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay. And then communicating threats, are you able to tell us what exactly he said to the officers, if it were to the officers, about, you know, what threats he said and what he said that he might do to the officers?
I don't have the language, but I believe the threat was actually made to a paramedic, not the officers.
Okay.
Was Mr. Williams handcuffed when the suprascapular strike occurred?
Great question. I think there needs some clarification on that. So initially, Mr. Williams was handcuffed, had both handcuffs secured on him, and a struggle starts to ensue, and he's able to free one of his hands from the handcuffs. At that point, the struggle continues, and they go to the ground. So he had one hand that did have a handcuff on him, on his hand. The other arm was tucked underneath him. And so that's when the officer made those strikes to try to stun that muscle, that nerve, so that they could gain compliance of that arm.
And Mr. Williams says his side is that he feels he was punched in the head and he was held down by his neck, but you have watched that video and you are definitively saying that's not what happened.
Correct.
So all this to say, a lot of stuff is still under investigation, but the suprascapular hit, the fact that you were able to identify that's where he was hit is the reason that these officers are not on administrative leave.
Yeah. So yes and no. So the reason they're not on administrative leave is that our initial review of BWC and information that we have from the reports, again, it's an ongoing investigation, does not show that there was any significant policy violations that, or training issues that would require us to take that action and put them on admin leave. Not just the fact that the strikes were made and he was using that approved technique. We look at the whole incident to make sure that there aren't any issues that are egregious that rise to the level of us placing an employee on admin leave.
So if it
Admin
was
duty.
found in the video that this was in fact deadly force, you said that it was not at this point, but if it was found when you saw it, you're like, oh, that's deadly force, would they be on administrative leave?
They could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every instance we deal with is very fact specific. So it would depend on, you know, if it was deadly force that was used, was it justified? You know, do we think there could have been a justification for that? Yeah, just very, very fact specific.
The 3 officers seen in the video, how long have they worked for the department?
I don't know that offhand.
We've had a couple of videos lately. We had the incident with the young people who were in the car, and then that went viral. We had another one where a GPD officer ran a red light. They seem to be circulating lately. When a resident of Greensboro sees something maybe like that and is concerned, what would you tell the people of Greensboro to do with that video, maybe instead of posting it on social media?
You know, obviously, I'm familiar with the red light video and the other. When we see it, our duty is that we have to investigate and follow up and see if there's a policy violation, if there's a law, if there's something that we need to correct on our end. So, you know, I think in some of these cases that it's individuals that are trying to gain some social media notoriety and posting these videos and, you know, getting out there in front of the public. I would ask that anytime you see any officer that is engaged in something that you don't think was right, that you thought was incorrect behavior, practice, something like that, that please contact us. We have Professional Standards Division, which is 6-7 sergeants that are assigned to investigate that. We want to make sure our officers are out here doing the right thing. We do make mistakes, things happen, and when we do make mistakes, we need to be accountable and correct that behavior.
And
I'll
just,
be sending also media a release of some of the information that he shared later this afternoon.
The last question.
just to clarify, Williams went to the hospital for chest pain?
So when he was in custody in the vehicle and the officers approached him, he said his chest hurt. The officers asked if he wanted EMS. He said yes. They contacted EMS. As the officers did further investigation, they led them to believe that he ingested an illegal narcotic. And for us, our practice is when that happens, they're going to the hospital no matter what, even if they want to go or not. So the chest pain spurred the EMS response. Once we determined that there was the ingestion of the illegal narcotic, he was going to the hospital one way or the other. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.